All right, guys, here we go. This is another nymph, really easy for us. This one in particular is just an all-arounder or something that I like to use. It's super simple to tie and imitates just about any kind of mayfly nymph that's out there, especially the smaller ones. Um, you can tie them as small as you want and as big as you want, really, but the key is it's easy to tie. So the first thing I do is I always tie it in a flashback. I use an opal piece of material there that gets you a nice color on it. And rather than using metal on the wraps, I usually use this really nice sulky thread. I buy it in gold, purple, etc., and it seems to work really well, and it lasts forever. It's pretty durable stuff. So we're gonna start out pretty easy and do that, and go from there. So here we go. All right. So you take your fly. Usually, I tie these with like a darker heads. Sometimes in the wintertime, if I'm fishing steelhead, I might tie them a little bigger and tie them with a brighter bead, and that bead kind of is like mayfly or egg. It might be a little confusing. What I like to do is I like to tie mine with a hot spot. So I use a orange thread. The orange thread is I tie with a 6/0 just because I like to have this waxed Semper Fly thread, and I like to have a 6/0 because when I get to the head, I want to have a lot of room because I like to tie it in tight, and you got a couple things folding over at the head there that make it pretty hard to do. So come in, I tie after the bead again. You know me, I don't use lead because I like to use my bead as the weight indicator, and I wrap back. A simple way to get touching turns. I'm usually pretty sloppy about it, but if you want to do touching turns, hold your thread so it's up off at a pretty steep angle, probably 80, 85 degrees, and then come over and hit your thread and then roll down onto it. It's going to press that thread down and put them in touching turns. You don't have to be so exact. If you're down here, you got to be really exact. If you're up here, you don't have to be exact at all. I come back to the bend of the hook, right where that's at. I wrap forward, I break my thread off. Okay, so the first thing I do is I tie in my tails. Recipes for flies are really simple. The easiest way I think about it is the first thing that you want to come out at the back of the fly, you want to go in first. Or the last thing that you want to be on top of the fly is going to go in sometimes first so that it comes up on top. So that was kind of a hard description, but it somewhat works. I take Coq-de-Lion. I like to use a light color because I want my tails to be visible. And what I do is I take my Coq-de-Lion, I pick the number of threads, and then I just yank them off. And when I yank them off, I hold them perpendicular to the stem of the feather, and then I just yank them off like that. And you can see they come off nice and straight. Barb oils are intact. I just kind of pinch them. I line them up so that they're a little longer than the bend of the hook. One way to measure it is take the bend of your hook and measure that distance, and that should be your tie-in point. Okay, so there I go. I got it held in place. Loose thread. I'm going to hold them off at an angle. Wind back. I'm holding them towards me a little bit, so because when my thread comes over top, it's going to put them on the top of the fly. Okay. Down towards the back. That's looking pretty good. Come forward. Boom. I just pull these ends up, snip them with my scissors, and that gets them pretty close. Gets them out of the way. They're going to get covered up anyhow. I'm not too worried about it. I build up my fly a little bit here at the head. There we go. And just kind of bring it back and forth. That gives me that nice profile on the fly, a little heavier towards the head. Okay, pretty straightforward. I'm going to build my fly up a little bit because I like this fly to be a little bit chunky, not too bad. And the first thing I do is I take my feather. We all know what this is, pheasant tail, right? And I pull a fairly good chunk of pheasant tail off on a nice piece of feather, usually somewhere in the middle here. So I take, I don't know, what's there, 9 pieces of feather in the row. Pull those down. I get everything else kind of out of the way. I pull those down. That's too much. And then I cut them off because I want to hold them straight, but I want to cut them off. And so I get a nice chunk of feather. All my tips are aligned. Now, when I tie these in, I want to have a lot of feathers, so I'm going to turn them around, put the tips towards the front. Same thing, I'm a couple threads off the front. I've done this before. I hold these so the tips are towards the front. What I do is I trim the tips because the tips are pretty fragile. So I'm going to trim it so that where my fingers are, you can see this, where my fingers are is where I'm going to do my pinch wrap. So there you go. I'm going to put that on the head. That's where my thread is. It's going to come up. I'm going to pinch, bring it straight down. Now I trapped them in. I pulled them in a little bit back so they're not over the top of the bead. And then I just work my way back in touching turns. And not touching turns, but just enough to get it out of the way and then bring it forward. And then I put a handful of wraps up here by the head, nice and tight, get myself some build. I then take my feathers and I just kind of leave them lay back, because the next thing I need to do, and some people do this first, but the next thing I need to do is I need to tie in my material that I'm going to put my wraps around the pheasant tail so it stays in place. So I take some of my material, I'll pull it off. I get a nice decent chunk because I don't want to be stuff's so cheap and it's like so readily available to you that I don't want to be like trying to tie with a tiny little piece, making it a headache for myself. So I cut a nice piece off. You can see that's probably, 8-9 inches long. Again, I come up towards the front, come off the thing, couple turns, the bead, do a pinch wrap, and that puts it on there on the top, pull it back so I don't have to cut it off. Less cutting, bring it all the way back to the beginning of where the feather is, and then bring it forward, the thread forward to the bead of the hook. Now, I use this little clip I got. It's a little hair clip. You buy them at Walmart or wherever. Clip that to my vise, and that keeps that out of the way. Now, I take my feather. Since it's so long, I'm not worried about using a hackle plier. If it was shorter, I'd probably use a hackle plier. But I just put a turn in on the back, and then I just basically do touching turns all the way up to the eye of the hook. Once I get to the eye of the hook, I tie it off, come over it, boom, trap it. It's now in place. Trap it again. 1, 2 in front. Trap it again. 1, 2 in front. Okay, I got a nice turn. In this case, I don't have anything around, so I'm going to really snip this. I'm going to use my scissors. I've described before. I don't need to slide this, but I'm going to snip it and cut it. Cuts it nice and clean. Get that junk out of the way. Maybe tie that down a little bit. Okay. Some guys will even put a little kind of half hitch or something in here and tie it off. And that way you never lose that. It won't come undone. Wind up your thread. Now I take my silky thread and I wrap the other direction. Okay, so I like to put one wrap at the back and then I put an angle on it and I bring it forward. And I got a nice turn in there. Now you can see my thread wound up because I tied it off. So I'm going to take that off. I'm going to come around my head, 1, 2. I don't really care. I like to tie it nice and tight. I'm going to go around my sulky thread because that's going to capture it. And then I'm going to come up over. 1, 2, around it and up over. Around it and up over. Okay, now that stuff is tied in real tight. I went the opposite direction because that's going to hold all of my pheasant tail in place. Okay, so we got that cut off and clean. All right, so we got a nice clean look here. The trick now is I need to tie in my opal tinsel material. When I tie in my opal tinsel material, that's going to give me my back. Now, this is where a lot of people mess up. When you tie in your opal tinsel material, you can come back a little bit off the bead of your hook, but tie it in just on your side. You want to come in and pinch wrap. And that pinch wrap is going to help you hold that material up on top. Okay? Boom. I'm going to tie that in pretty good. Might roll the front back a little bit and get that little tab out of there. I can cut it off or I can just roll it back. And usually what I do is I roll it back and then I tie back further than you would expect on that thorax area. Because when I pull this forward, look how short that is to the bead. Okay, I'm going to tilt my vise and show you. You see that? See how short that is to the bead? So I'm going to go a little further back. It's going to make your bug feel like, man, that thing is really short. But when you build that up with some dubbing, it's going to look really sharp. So I take Nature Spirit has nice dubbing. It's rabbit, snowshoe rabbit dubbing. And I use the brown. This is one of my favorite things. I've showed you how to build one of these, but it's a glue-based dubbing tool or dubbing wax. It's not a wax. It's actually glue from a mouse trap or a rat or a spider trap, and I rub it on my thread really good. And you can see when I pull this off, see all that goo? That's getting on my thread. My dubbing's going to go on that, so I don't need that much, so I rub it off. But I align my thread, make it the right length, and I take some of my dubbing, and boom, I just touch dub it like that to where the glue is. And look, it's building that up real nice. I didn't really have to do anything. So now, start in the back. I wrap over itself a few times. Boom, I get a nice buggy thorax. Pull it back. Come around 2 times in the front. Wham. Pull my tinsel up front. I pull my tinsel over to my side a little bit. So I'm pulling it towards me, and when I bring my thread over, my thread's going to put it right on top because my thread is pushing towards the camera. Okay, if it's not straight, I turn it towards me. I just straighten it up a little bit. Okay, look at that. Look how straight that is now. Okay, I put a couple wraps on there in front or over top, and then a couple wraps in front. I pull all my dubbing back. 1, 2. Okay, I'm just going to tie this off because you got a lot of stuff up here. So I usually put a 1 or 2 turn whip finish on up there. Boom, that ties it off. Now I can take my fingers and weight off. When I take my opal material and I pull it up tight, not too tight because I don't want to pull it under the thread, but I want to pull it tight. Get my scissors in nice and tight. Boom, snip that off real close to the thread. Now that I got it close to the thread, I take my dubbing tool. I can see all of my dubbing's pushing back. I'm going to tie it off. So I come in, I do a 3-turn whip. That's 3 turns. And I look at my collar and I'm like, yeah, I like it a little deep, a little darker, or brighter, I should say. A little more fulfilled. So I put another 3-turn on there, tie it off. Now here is where I come in with my scissors. And I said before, I can do it 2 ways. I can just slide one of my scissors, or I can make a V. I like a V. I slide it up and boom, done. It's cut tight. There's nothing on there. Okay. Next thing I do, I take a little bit of clear dubbing and I push all my dubbing down. I take a little bit of clear UV and I put a dab of clear UV right on top on the thread and on the thorax. And I turn it upside down. What that's going to do is let that really slick UV not only soak into the thread, but come off of that thorax, and I light it up. Boom. Now I'm all set. That's nice and hard. I pull my tails down, make sure they look nice and good. Okay, cool. That looks pretty good. Everything's hard. Now you can see, man, that opal really shines. Light hits it just right. Boom, those fish are on fire. Deadly fly. Okay, last thing. Take my little Stonfo tool. It's got some Velcro on it. And I basically I brush all that dubbing down away from my opal. So I brush it down on the sides. And then I come underneath and I really kind of Give that stuff a good turn. Now, wow, it's looking good and buggy like that. I don't want it too long. So I usually come in, and I come in at an angle like this because I want to basically have my scissors come up straight. So they're going to hit right where the tail begins if I were to cut that far. And I go as long as the tip of the hook. So boom, I cut like that. See how that left a nice V there? That fly's done. There you go. Simple fly to tie. You can tie it in a few seconds. The dubbing brush makes a world of it, or the dubbing wax type tool makes a world of difference. And the rabbit hair dub does fantastic. So there you go. That's your bug with your legs. Active, easy to tie, looks like a ton of different things, and they last forever. So have a good day out there on the water. I hope you slam some big ones.